Hello and welcome to the December 2022 Recreational Astronomy Night Meeting online edition of the RASC Toronto Centre. My name is Paul Markov, coming to you from Markham, Ontario. And aside from hosting these meetings, I also look for presentations and speakers. So if you have a presentation in mind, or if you know of someone who could present at our meetings, please get in touch with me. We have openings for the February and later meetings, and those are held on the first Wednesday of each month. Before we start the presentations, I'd like to thank our technical team that makes these online presentations possible for us. And that team is comprised of Andrew and Betty Reed, Emma Seabrook, Ward Legros, and Ennio Cellucci. We have only two presentations this evening to allow time for the annual general meeting. So I expect the presentations to be done around 8:30. The speakers for this evening are Chris Vaughan with The Sky This Month, and then we'll have Alex Arjomand and Charles Young give us a report on the annual Algonquin adventure that took place in September. Tom Luton will close the meeting with announcements as usual. If you have questions for our speakers, please ask them through the YouTube chat box, and Emma will ask the speaker the questions on your behalf. And if you're attending a Toronto Centre meeting for the first time, whether you're a member or not, please let us know through the chat, the YouTube chat as well. So let's get the meeting started with Chris and The Sky This Month.
Thanks. Thank you, Paul. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to cover the period of the sky from tonight, past the holidays and into New Year and into January 4th, 2023. Let's get started. So what I'm going to touch on tonight is a bit about space exploration news, and then get into observing the various doings of the sun and moon, planets, comets, asteroids, a few satellite passes, and then some things to look at in terms of variable stars, double stars, and some deep sky objects to look at during the moonless periods. I'll post the information that I'm sharing tonight on the rascto.ca website shortly. So for those that want the headlines and then maybe doze off or something like that, here's a summary of some of the key events of this coming month. We have the full moon tonight. I'm going to occult Mars, which is at opposition tonight also. We have 11.5 hours of imaging time. We've got opportunities to watch the variable star Algol do its thing, a few meteor showers, and some planet motions, as well as we get the northern winter solstice as well. In terms of space exploration, we don't pay as much attention to launches as we used to, but I did pick out a few key things that are coming up in the next little while. First of all, the Artemis 1 mission is on its way back home, and it is due to re-enter Earth's atmosphere on Sunday at 1:06 p.m. Eastern Time, or 18:06 UTC. So I'm sure there'll be a live broadcast of that. Sometime this month at around 3 a.m. Eastern Time, a Falcon 9 rocket will lift off from Cape Canaveral, carrying the first commercial Hakuto R lunar lander for a company called iSpace. It's iSpace Mission 1. It also includes two small lunar rovers from United Arab Emirates and Japan, and they will land somewhere in the Lacus Somnorium region of the moon. That's interesting. And then there is a word that sometime in December, SpaceX is planning to launch their super heavy rocket with their Starship on top of it, as seen in the picture behind the words here. And it's intended to do an Earth orbit, re-enter, and splash down. So that'll be exciting when that happens. All right, let's get into some observing. If you're interested in contributing to the tracking of the increase in light pollution in your area, there is a facility called globeatnight.org that allows you to record your observations and submit them to a database that allows people to produce maps of light pollution over time. And during the observing period, you're assigned, or they declare a particular constellation to be the target to look at. You basically head outside during the nights indicated here, December 15th to 24th, find Pegasus in your sky and just see how many of its stars you can see from where you are. They give you these handy charts that let you judge that, and then you'll log in and submit your results. Here's the contact information for the organization and the different campaigns through the year. We're at the final campaign of 2022, which is coming up during the moonless period from December 15 to 24. Speaking of the sun, we're looking at sunrises and sunsets. We've got today the sun rose at 7:37 a.m. and set this evening at 4:40 p.m. This is the year's earliest sunsets happening around the 9th, December 9th this week, giving us a total of 9 hours of daylight. By the time of our next Recreational Astronomy Night meeting on January 4th, sunrise will be at 7:51, sunset at 7:54, with again 9 hours and 3 minutes of daylight. And that will give us around the latest sunrises of the year, around January 3rd. The reason the time of daylight hasn't changed very much over that period is because we're going to hop across the northern winter solstice, which is the official shortest daylight day of the year. That happens on December 21 at 4:48 p.m. And also we get Earth at perihelion, its closest approach to the sun, occurring on January 4th at 11 a.m. Now, astronomers are really into something called astronomical twilight and wanting to get started on their observing when that is done with. So astronomical twilight is the last bit of twilight that we get when the sun goes down. When the sun gets more than 18 degrees below the horizon, the sky gets as dark as it's going to get that night. And of course, we get a period of time where the sun is out of the picture and the sky is very dark. And then in the dawn, the sky begins to brighten up again. And so we have periods of astronomical twilight after sunset and before sunrise. So today, astronomical twilight ends at 6:23 p.m. and the sky will begin to brighten up again at 5:54 a.m., giving us 11 and a half hours of total darkness, aside from the moon, but total darkness is as dark as it can get without the sun. And we get about a minute more of that dark period per day at this time of the year. A month from now, the astronomical twilight will end at 6:37 and start in the morning at 6:07. So again, it's about 11 and a half hours. And at that point, we're getting a minute less of darkness per day. Here's just a graph of the sun daytime, nighttime balance. You see the bright areas of the daytime, the dark areas of the nighttime. And the period I'm covering is the yellow square, starting here in late December and ending in early January. In terms of the moon, we've got perigee and apogee of the moon, which astronomers typically don't worry too much about. But in terms of the phases of the moon on December 7th, so tonight, we've got our full oak or full cold or full long night's moon. The moon gets different names according to the different cultures and backgrounds that you might have. This will coincide with an occultation of Mars, which I'll come back to in a minute. On Friday, December 16th, we get the moon reaching its third quarter phase. That's when it rises beyond midnight and stays clear of the evening sky. And that third quarter moon will rise late and then linger into the morning daytime. Our new moon period, where we're completely moonless all night long, happens on December 23rd at 5:17 a.m. And that new moon will be happening almost coincident with perigee, the moon's closest approach to the Earth, which will produce extra large tides around the globe. And finally, on December 29th at 8:20 a.m., we've got the first quarter moon. So the first quarter moon rises in the afternoon, lingers until around midnight, and that's the best sort of week of the month for looking at the moon with binoculars, telescopes, and so on. All right, let's talk about Mars at opposition. That's kind of the big headline topic for today's presentation. So tonight, Mars is going to reach opposition in the sense that the Earth is moving between Mars and the sun. At opposition, a planet rises at sunset, sets at sunrise. It's closest to us at any other point in its orbit. And for Mars and Earth, these linkages or these link-ups happen every 25.6 months approximately. So this schematic here is looking down on the solar system with the sun in the middle, and it's showing you the green orbit of the Earth, rather circular, and the brown orbit of Mars, which is rather more elliptical. So Earth's orbit varies by about 3% of its distance from the sun, whereas Mars varies about 20% of its distance from the sun. And so depending on the time of the year when Earth and Mars have these these alignments, these oppositions, we're at different distances away from the planet. So this opposition is happening on December 8th, 2022. And over the next number of oppositions, that distance to Mars will increase to a maximum of about 101 million kilometers in 2027. And then we'll start diminishing our distance between the two planets. The next really close opposition between Earth and Mars, when they're 56 million kilometers apart, will happen in 2050. So mark your calendars. But at that time, I believe Mars in a telescope will look about 50% bigger than it will at tonight's opposition. By the way, Mars was closest to Earth a week ago. And that's because at this time of the year, the orbits are diverging. They're getting wider apart with each passing day. So the geometry works out that we were actually closer to Mars a week ago. If you are getting your telescope up to look at Mars, Mars's Earth-facing side tonight around midnight will show this scene. This is an unflipped scene. So your telescope might flip this view upside down or mirror it left-right. But I've labeled some of the darker features, some of the more significant features, especially the Terrena Terra and the Syrtis Major Planum, which looks like a dark wedge pointing basically towards Mars's polar cap. So you should expect to see the polar cap shining brightly near the edge of Mars's disk if you have a decent sized telescope. Tonight, you'll get a peak brightness in the sky of minus 1.97 magnitude. That's actually enhanced a little bit at opposition by something called the opposition surge or the Seeliger effect, where the sunlight hitting the object dead on and reflecting back right towards us and back towards the sun behind us actually enhances the brightness a little bit beyond what it would normally be. Mars will be 82.15 million kilometers away. It's about 4.72 light minutes distance. And in a telescope, it'll appear 17 arc seconds wide. That's about a third the size of Jupiter, maybe a bit more than a third the size of Jupiter. Now, after this week, Mars will start to get fainter in the sky. It'll get smaller in telescopes. The green graph here shows us Mars was largest last week on November 30th, and now it will start to decrease in size when viewed in a telescope. Each of these vertical lines is about a week. And you can see that the peak brightness, the yellow line, is at a max tonight, and it'll actually continuously fade over the next little while. Mars will remain in our skies for a number of weeks and months, but it will definitely lose its luster over the coming days. Now, if you're planning to take a look at Mars, here are some tips. So try to look at the planet when it's highest in the sky, if possible. You don't need to wait until 1 a.m. when it's highest, but certainly try not to look at it through your telescope when it's too near to the horizon. Higher is better. If the air is a bit turbulent, take long looks at the eyepiece to capture the moments when you see some clarity. It'll snap into clarity occasionally if you take your time. You could take a look to see if you can find the moons of Mars. They're faint, magnitude 11.5 and 12.5, so it's better if you have a big telescope if you want to have a hope of seeing those moons. Also, tonight wouldn't be the night, as I'll get to in a second. You can find a nice online Mars mapping tool that is here at nightskies.net/skyguide/Mars. It actually lets you look at two different views of the planet, labeled and unlabeled, and you can actually set the time and date to match when you're seeing the planet. Now, you can use filters on Mars to make it look a little better. You might even find Mars is too bright through a telescope tonight. If you find that's the case, maybe try putting your moon filter on Mars to diminish its brightness a little bit, and that might pick up some of the features a little bit better. Or you can use some colored filters as listed here to enhance particular aspects of the planet. You don't need filters, but these are some ways that you can get alternate views of it that might be a little bit better. All right, so here's the big news. So tonight the full moon is opposite the sun, and so also is Mars opposite the sun. And it'll turn out that the moon is going to pass in front of or occult Mars for observers located in this band. So basically all of North America, or most of Canada, all of the USA, across the Atlantic, and into parts of Northern Africa. In Toronto, the Mars will ingress or move behind the moon at 10:28:39 p.m. Eastern Time. And that will take about 75 seconds for that event to happen. Mars will reappear at 11:16:29, again, taking about 80 seconds for that to happen. and it'll emerge from the southeastern limb of the moon between Tycho and Stevinus. Let me just show you that in Stellarium here. So bring this up and zoom in, and we'll get into the evening here. All right. So the moon moves by its own diameter about once an hour. So by the time we get to 10 p.m., this is the sky for Toronto. And by the way, this star Kappa Tauri, which is kind of following Mars, will also be occulted by the moon a bit later in the evening. So I'm just going to advance the time. Here we are getting close to that appointed time of 10:29 or so. Zoom in here a little bit more. And you can see that if you advance the time in seconds, it takes about 70 seconds for the moon to completely cover the planet. Now, in this case, the moon is full. So that means we've got lit limbs of the moon on both sides. Sometimes when we're doing occultations of other objects, we're dealing with a moon that's lit on one side and dark on the other. In this case, it's lit on both sides. And the Mars will emerge from behind the moon's opposite limb, starting at about, for Toronto, at about 11, here we go, 11:16 or so, and a few seconds. Now, where you are in Canada, if you're watching us tonight from another location, the location where Mars emerges from behind the moon will vary according to your location. Now, if you want to be safe, you could use a low magnification eyepiece that fills the entire moon, and then watch Mars when it peeks out. If you want to get that nice close-up view, then you need to figure out where exactly to focus your attention on the moon at the appointed time. So as I said, in this case, here's Tycho, here's Stevinus, so the Mars will reappear kind of in the moon's lower right quadrant. If you're viewing the event from further west in Canada, the Mars will emerge at a more northerly location. So I think in Winnipeg, Prairie provinces, it'll be up here kind of near Mare Frigoris, the dark patch here. And then if you're in Vancouver, it'll be up here near Mare Crisium. If you're out in the Maritimes, Mars will just skim through the southern pole of the moon. So it'll kind of disappear here and emerge right about here. So that's something to definitely get onto. Now, just get back to here we go. Now, if you haven't got your telescope ready for the event, we could pause my video now, go off and get your telescope, get set up, get it ready to go. Put it outside if you've got cold weather where you are, get your telescope outside, get it chilling down. You've got a few hours to do that, and then come back and put me on 1.25 and catch up. All right, here's some of the events that are happening in terms of the planets this month. So we have Mercury and Venus are hanging out just above the western horizon after sunset. Mercury will reach its most visible night on December 21st, so it's in the process of elongating farther and farther from the sun until that date. They'll make a pretty trio with the crescent moon on December 24th, and then Mercury will loop up to the sort of outer turn of its orbit and start heading back sunward later in the month and pass just about 1.3 degrees or 1.4 degrees from Venus on December 28th. That's about a thumb's width. Now, if you're planning to look at them through binoculars or a telescope, do be careful that the sun is completely set below the horizon before you aim any optics in that direction. As I mentioned, we're getting the occultation of Mars tonight. Jupiter is going to be in the sky. I'll just give you a view of the sky here. Let's bring this back and go back to this evening so you can get a sense. What's neat is that these days, we've got all the planets above the horizon at the same time. So you can see here, we've got at about 5:15 p.m., we've got Mercury and Venus there sitting above the horizon. Then we've got Saturn. We've got Jupiter catching our eye most of the evening long. Saturn's about 20 times fainter than Jupiter. And then head on over to the northeast and you can pick up Mars and the moon tonight. The moon's going to move out of the way over the next little while. You'll also find it interesting that Uranus is tucked in between Mars and Jupiter, and Neptune, as I mentioned here on the slide a moment ago, is spotted there near the ecliptic, just a little bit, I think that's about 8 or 9 degrees to the west of Jupiter. The main belt asteroids Vesta and Juno are also hanging around in this patch of the sky as well. So there's plenty to see in terms of getting in the planet viewing. If you do want to take a look at Saturn, Saturn is starting to end its visibility window for us. It's starting to sink a little bit lower in the west in the evening time. But one of the fun things about Saturn is that its moon Iapetus, which I think orbits about every 88 days or so, varies in brightness by about half, between magnitude 11, magnitude 12, when it reaches the edge of its orbit. That's because the moon itself is 50% bright, 50% dark. So Iapetus is near its minimum dimmest magnitude around now, December 2-3, and over the next little while, it'll migrate to the opposite side of the planet and brighten up. It's actually going to cross the rings of Saturn on December 22nd. Not sure how visible that might be. I haven't tried that one, but that might be something to keep an eye out for. All right, in terms of looking at things like variable stars, one of the great ones to look at this time of year is the star Algol, or Beta Persei. It's generally climbing the eastern sky in evening. It's an eclipsing binary system where you have two stars, one bright, one small, in orbit of one another. Their orbit is close to edge on towards Earth, and that means that every 2.87 days, the fainter star blocks the light from the brighter star, and it dims the light. So you've got the fainter star in front, you get a small dimming, but when the secondary star goes behind the main star, you get a deep dimming in brightness. So that takes about 5 hours to dim to its minimum and about 5 hours to recover. And most of the time it sits here at a general even brightness of about magnitude 2.2. Magnitude 2.2 is similar to the star Almach, which is nearby. I can show you that in a moment here. And when it's at its minimum, it's at magnitude 3.4, about half as bright, and it's similar to this little star Rho Persei, which is a neighbor of Algol's in the constellation. So that's kind of a fun exercise. And you can look up these events. They happen as I say, every 3 days or so. They're listed in the Rask Observer's Handbook and at other online sources. The next minimum of Algol will happen at 12:08 a.m. So after midnight on Friday evening, December 9th. And what you can do there is you can go out after dinner, find Algol in the sky at its normal brightness, and then watch it through the evening as it fades to its minimum just after midnight. And then it'll recover itself after that. Another fun variable star to check out is Myra, which is in the constellation of Cetus. It's in the neck of the sea serpent or whale. It's also known as Omicron Ceti. It's the brightest of the so-called Myra-type variable stars. So it was one of the first discovered of this type. It's a pulsating star that actually inherently pulsates, it's brighter and dimmer, and it's about 200 or 300 light years away. And this is actually a light curve of observations that people have taken over time. This is a year's worth of observations ending tonight, and you can see how it rises in brightness for about 110 days from about magnitude 9.5, and then it decreases in brightness over about 220 days. So it brightens to about magnitude 2.5 or 3, and then it fades down to 9.5. So currently it's down here near its minimum brightness. So that means in about 5 months, it'll brighten back up again. So it's something you might want to check out now, and then remember to check back on later on. If you're interested in double stars, here are a few nice ones that you can check out. So find Orion's Belt and look for a naked eye star that's just a little bit to the lower right of Alnitak. And if you put binoculars or a telescope on that, you'll see a beautiful gathering or clump of stars in a sort of a dart shape, a wedge shape. And they're beautiful. They're a neat little clump of multiple stars. Over here in Cancer, you've got Iota Cancri, which is a blue and yellow pair of stars separated by about 30 arc seconds. Those are really pretty. And then down here, once the big dog Canis Major rises, it's a little bit later in the evening right now, but it'll be with us all winter long. You can look for the star 145 Canis Majori. If you're using a go-to telescope, you might need to plug in HR2764. We nicknamed this the Winter Albireo because it's actually another blue, sort of a blue-yellow pair, really pretty. Comets. So we have one comet in the sky that's really worth looking at right now. It's Comet C 2022 E3 ZTF. ZTF, the letters in the brackets here indicate the system or robotic telescope that just made the discovery of the comet. It's currently at magnitude 10.5 and still brightening. It's in the eastern sky before dawn, rises around 3 a.m. about now. It's busy traveling north through Corona Borealis, and it is predicted to reach magnitude 5, which is easy binoculars view, maybe naked eye, I don't know. Comets seldom do what we really expect them to do. But that will happen around the end of January. By that point, it'll have reached the northern sky near Polaris, so it'll be conveniently placed for us to see it then. By the way, this picture is taken by, the Bert Gaffney robotic telescope. That's a free service that anybody could set up an account with and request objects to be photographed by that robotic telescope. It's really fun. Here's the light curve of that comet. These are little squares of the observations that have been reported so far. We're right around here now. And this is a great website for tracking this, cobs.si. So you can see that we're able to predict based on its passes through the solar system, its distance from us and from the sun, when it's likely to get brightest. And so we don't know if this will hold, but we're on the right track. If you want to find it in the sky, here's a star chart for it. This is the constellation of Corona Borealis, which is beside Hercules, the keystone of Hercules, and just to the lower left of the bright star Arcturus. And this is the trajectory of the comet over the next month. So from tonight till our next meeting, it'll be heading, this is actually celestial north every night. And you'll note that on the 15th of December, it'll be very easy to find. It'll be smack dab between two of the stars in the crown, Epsilon and Delta, Corona Borealis. So this is actually in the morning sky right now. But as I said, over time, it'll actually migrate nicely into the evening sky. We've got 3 meteor showers in the period I'm covering. We've got the Geminid meteor shower, which normally runs from late November to late December. It's usually the strongest show of the year. It'll peak this year overnight on Tuesday, December 13th, so that's next week. But there will be a bright moon in the sky that rises at 9:45 p.m. So you might want to get out right after dinner time, see if you can catch some meteors before the moon shows up. Once the moon does show up, you could also sometimes trick it by hiding the moon behind a building or tree to allow you to still see some of the meteors. These ones are often bright and intensely colored. They're often slower than average meteors because the source material are more rocky particles from an asteroid named 3200 Phaethon. They'll appear to be radiating from a point in Gemini. The Ursid meteor shower runs from mid-December to the late December. It'll peak on Thursday afternoon, December 22nd. So that means we need dark skies for meteor showers. That means we're limited to watching for meteors later that day on Thursday night, or maybe getting up early and seeing them on Thursday morning. We won't be quite seeing it at the peak, but we should still see some, a fewer than the peak number, but which is normally 15 or 20 at the peak. What's great is that it's going to be a moonless night that night. So maybe to make a point of seeing that one. The source material for that is Comet Tuttle, and this shower has been known to have outbursts of greater numbers of meteors in some years, so stay tuned. And finally, we've got the Quadrantids meteor shower. The Quadrantids meteor shower is going to peak on Tuesday, January 3rd on the evening, but you can certainly watch all night, and the best time for meteors is typically in the pre-dawn when the radiant is higher in the sky. When the radiant is low, half of those meteors are being hidden by the bulk of the Earth, but when a radiant is nice and high, you'll get more opportunity for them to streak across the sky. You don't want to watch a meteor showers radiant, though, because those meteors are coming straight towards you and they'll have little tiny tails or streaks. You want to watch for the meteors well away from the radiant. That night, we'll have a bright moon that sets at 4:30 a.m. So if you are wanting to set the alarm and get up, after 4:30, you've got a couple of hours of darkness before sunrise. This has got a short period. It's only about a 6-hour peak of intense meteor activity. We can see up to 100 per hour. Some of those would be bright fireballs, and we think the source of that is a comet seen 1490 Y1. The name of the strange name of this constellation is named for an abandoned constellation called the Mural Quadrant, which used to occupy the sky up here near, here's Arcturus, here's Bootes, Corona Borealis, Canis Venatici. So it's no longer considered a formal constellation, but that's the patch of sky it is. If you're interested in seeing satellites, unfortunately, for the next little while, most of our satellite passes of this International Space Station will be in the pre-dawn. So we have some evening passes that are going to linger until December 10th, most of those between 5:15 and 7 p.m. But then we're going to get morning passes from December 15th to January 8th, most of those between 5:30 and 7 in the morning. Here's a list of a few of the better ones I picked up, including a very, very high one almost near the zenith. That'll be just before 7 a.m. here on December 19th. Now, most of the time when we're looking at deep sky objects or the fainter objects that we're interested in, we wanted to look at them when they're highest in the sky, the same as I mentioned for Mars being higher and therefore less subject to less atmospheric turbulence. So objects tend to be brighter and easier to see when they're highest in the sky. So what we do is we like to watch them or look at them when they're transiting the meridian. So when they're passing the due south direction, they're rising in the east, culminating or reaching their highest point in the sky, and then descending into the west. So I'm showing you here the constellations that are kind of passing their highest point at various times of the night on the next moonless period, which is in the December 22nd sort of range. The air mass circle. So when objects are higher, we're seeing them through less of the Earth's atmosphere. Objects that we view at the zenith we're viewing through one blanket's worth of air. As we get lower, the blanket of air gets thicker and thicker. By the time it gets to 1.5 times its usual thickness, the effects of that turbulence get stronger and stronger. So the lower you go, the more and more air is going to bother you. So things that are in the circle I've got labeled in yellow here. So here's the constellations. We've got things like Cetus. There's that Myra star we talked about. Pisces, Andromeda, Aries, Triangulum, Perseus, and Cassiopeia. I'm going to mention some deep sky objects to check out in some of these constellations. So if you're viewing them on December 22nd, they'll be near their highest points around 8 p.m. in the evening. A couple of hours later, we start bringing in Taurus and Auriga. Perseus is moving through the southern horizon, to the meridian, and we've got this lengthy constellation of Eridanus passing at about 10 p.m. Around midnight, we're getting the best time to see Orion. We're getting Gemini, Taurus, Auriga. So all these superstar constellations of winter will be culminating at their best around midnight on December 22nd. And fear not, this 12 a.m. will move earlier and earlier as we move into January and February. So no need to stay up so late in December if you don't want to. And then by 2 in the morning, of course, some people will want to be out imaging and things like that late in the evening. So by 2 in the morning, we're picking up Cancer, Lynx, and Monoceros and some of these other constellations. All right, so let me switch over to Stellarium and show you a few of my recommendations for things to look at. And I just want to pick up my notes here. Here we go. So what we're going to do is so tonight we've got a full moon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to advance the date a couple of weeks beyond about the 16th. So the moon will be after last quarter, after third quarter, around December 16th and onwards. So if I get into the December 1920 sort of range, around after astronomical twilight, let me bring up some bookmarks here and I'll show you some great things to look at. So if you've looked at your current issue of Sky News magazine, I'm going to highlight some of the objects, walk you through some of the objects that I wrote up in the current Beyond Messier column. Everybody's used to looking at the Messier objects, but I like to indicate some other alternatives that you may never have seen before by highlighting some things in the Beyond Messier column. So number one first I've got to mention is NGC 752. NGC 752 is up here near Andromeda and Triangulum. Here's M31, the big Andromeda galaxy is nearby, as you can see. And 752 is a big, large magnitude 5.7 open star cluster. It's visible with unaided eyes on dark nights. It's great in binoculars, and you can certainly see it in any telescope, but don't magnify it too much because you want to fit it all in. It's located about 4.5 degrees from the star Almach. So Almach is that one that's actually the comparator to Algol. So there's Algol. So Algol is normally as bright as Almach, and when it dims, it's the same as Gorgonea tertia here. So yeah, it's located about here. You can actually find it by drawing a line between Almach and, let's see, Myzan. So if you sort of go from here, you can pick it up that way. Now this cluster is very sparse. It's relatively near to the Earth, but it's also very old. We think the stars have maybe already started to disperse. That's why it's a little bit bigger. It's got a lot of F, G, and K class stars, so evolved warm-colored stars, 9th and 10th magnitude. And in the middle, you'll see a little triangle anchored by a golden star. That golden star is actually not part of the cluster. It's in the foreground, so it's between us and the cluster. And you'll want to enjoy this neat, bright pair of double stars, 56 Andromedae, that sits just on the outskirts of the cluster. NGC 225 is another open cluster. This one's easy to find because it's basically just above the shallower V, or the shallower peak of Cassiopeia. So no matter which direction Cassiopeia is oriented, you want to find the W and go above the peak of the W by about a thumb's width. And here you pick up this nice little open cluster. It's magnitude 7. It's they're actually grouped into two groups of stars. There's a little clump on one side, and there's sort of a line of stars on the other with a bit of a gap in the middle. So you might notice that. If you pull back, you might notice that there's actually, I'll just turn off the sky here for a second. There's actually a big loop of stars that kind of goes like this and like this. It's sort of a big heart shape to it. That's kind of fun. So you'll need lower power to see that. The western lobe is a little bit fainter. And if you want to do imaging on this object, now normally imagers maybe not pay much attention to star clusters, but there's actually a reflection nebulosity in here, and there's some dark dust lanes. This would be a nice target for imaging as well. Now we move on to NGC 663. So NGC 663, let me just bring up so this is actually, where's my Messier 103? So that's actually Messier 103, if you're familiar with that. This is actually, NGC 663 is located here in Cassiopeia again. Now you're looking at the outer stretch of the W, the shallow half of the constellation's V. And it's basically midway between Rukba and Segin, but offset a little bit towards the double cluster and Perseus. So very bright. This open cluster is bright, magnitude 7. It's brighter than M103. It's visible with your unaided eyes, but certainly you want to use binoculars or a telescope at low magnification. Watch for a deep V of stars. So there's actually sort of two rows of stars in a V shape. And you'll notice that if you look at the tops of the Vs, that each of these pairs is a double star under more magnification. And then above it, there are actually a couple of red giant stars. So there's a couple of red stars here. And when you combine these two, if you make these eyes and this sort of the downturned mouth, it almost looks like the aliens from the Muppets. All right, a couple more. Now we're done. 925. So NGC 925 is a galaxy. This one's sitting here in Triangulum. The easiest way to find this one is to locate or identify the 3 stars of Triangulum. Then you want to hop down this span from Myzan to Gamma and hop by that same distance, but in the direction of, from Gamma, in the direction of, the rest of Perseus down this way. This is a not quite open, not quite face on. It's a little bit of an oblique spiral galaxy. It's the second brightest deep sky object in Triangulum after M33. It's visible in, say, 80 to 100 millimeter telescopes and larger telescopes on moonless nights. And you can use averted vision and see if you can see sort of the S shape of these dominating arms. Now, let me show you a twofer, 672. So 672 is kind of a 2 in the view. It's a bit reminiscent of a mini-me version or a miniature version of, M81, M82, or the whale and hockey stick that we see in the springtime galaxy. This pair is medium dim, so you need a bigger telescope to see these. And the way to see this set of objects is to find Hamal, the bright star in Aries. And if you go from there up to Merak in Andromeda, it's basically on that line, and it's just the tip of Triangulum kind of points to it. So if you put your finder scope with the low power, wider field eyepiece, you can pick up these two. They are, visible in a telescope, bigger than 80 millimeter if you have it, and definitely if you can try it on a moonless sky, you'll be better off. And last one is, I think one of the coolest ones, is the Fiddlehead Galaxy. This is surprising that this wasn't on Messier's list. It's a bright galaxy. It's fairly easy to pick up in a smaller telescope. It's a peculiar galaxy, so it's called ARP 78 from Halden Arp's Index of Peculiar Galaxies. It's here in Aries, and one of the greatest ways of finding it is to find the main brightest stars of Aries, so Hamal, Sheridan, slightly fainter Mesarthim, and then make a right angle down towards Taurus by that same span. Very easy to locate. You want to look for, if you can, use averted vision. Maybe you can pick up the dominant arm that swoops to the north and to the west. And if you're imaging it, or if you've got a bigger telescope, you can look for the little elliptical partner that we think might be the cause of the distortion, the gravitational interaction between those two galaxies. So that's it. Hopefully you can get out and get some clear skies and enjoy that. And I'll leave you with that.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris, for a very comprehensive look at the sky this month. Thank you so much. Let's go to Emma. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, we got a couple of questions in. First up, Leo says, can we see this through the clouds? Where's my cloud filter?
Hey, I'm going to get my telescope out. It's the full moon in Mars will cut through thin cloud. I think it's worth a try if you've got thin cloud.
Very true. We also got a second comment from Eric Briggs, who says there's an interesting asteroid occultation coming up Friday morning.
Nice. Well, share that on the forum, Eric, so we can all benefit.
That's it for questions and comments.
Great.
Right. Thanks again, Chris. All right, so let's move on to our next speakers. Alex and Charles will give us a report on the Algonquin adventure.
Okay. Hello. Good evening, everyone from the internet. Tonight, Alex and myself would like to share the fun that we had in one of our Star Party trip back in September this year. And the trip is called 2022 Annual Algonquin Adventure, or sometimes we call it 2022 AAA. This event has a very long history in RASC Toronto Center, and it was started back in 1998 by Lillian and Robert Chapman. But unfortunately, the last event was hosted in 2013, and we lost this tradition for a while. Now, this event is a combination of a camping trip combined with a stargazing party. And we chose Algonquin Provincial Park mainly because of two reasons. It is a very famous darkest sky with a Bordeaux 1 and 2, and also is one of the loveliest camping sites in Southern Ontario as well. And we were so fortunate that Alex and myself be able to resume this tradition in last year, 2021. Now, coming into 2022 this year, Alex and myself are co-chairing the observing committee, and it helped us to prepare this year AAA event as well. So Alex, would you like to take us to the detail of this year AAA and share the fun that we had during these 4 days?
I'd be delighted. Thank you, Charles. Wonderful. And if we can move over to the next slide, that would be great. Oh, sorry, if we can go back one. My apologies, Charles. Okay, so as Charles said already, the annual Algonquin Adventures is a long-standing tradition of the Toronto Centre that was organized by Bob and Lillian Chapman for many, many years. And towards the end of their run, I believe I unfortunately never had the opportunity to attend them myself, but what we had heard from Bob and Lil, as well as other Toronto Centre members, is that they had upwards of 50 or sometimes even 60 participants. So they were like sort of big flagship events. Now, given the fact that we were on the tail end of a global pandemic, and because Charles and I were relatively new at organizing events of this nature, we thought, it would be a much wiser idea to start small. So rather than sort of blasting public invitations beyond sort of the members only areas, we decided let's start small. Let's invite Toronto Centre members and perhaps their friends and family members this year. And so we primarily leveraged our forum for that purpose. And for those of you who are on the forum often and who are not interested in this subject, let me just apologize in advance. I think we had something like 130 different posts on the forum over the course of 6 or 7 months as people were really excited, registered, started asking a lot of questions. And for those of you on YouTube who don't know what our forum is all about, let me just encourage you to join the the Royal Astronomical Society Toronto chapter, and you can join our forum as well. Yeah, and so we had at the end, we had 8 or 9 Toronto RASC members join our annual camping trip. You can see their names there. Shout out to everybody, as well as a few others who had to back out at the last moment because of illness in their families. So, our hearts were with you. So if we can go on to the next slide, Charles. So as Charles said, we decided, well, I mean, of course, the name Algonquin is in it, the annual Algonquin Adventure. So we headed out to the Mew Lake Campground in Algonquin Park. For those of you who don't know Algonquin Park, if you're joining from outside of Canada, Algonquin Park is pretty big. Once you get sort of a couple of 100 kilometers north of most urban centers in Canada, there's nothing but space. And so for sake of comparison, Algonquin Park is something like the size of the state of Delaware in the United States. So a couple of things about Algonquin in late September. There's sort of 2 words to keep in mind. One is cold and the other is dew. So the temperatures actually, when we got there, it was the first weekend in the year where temperatures actually dipped below freezing. So I think we were just around the 0-1 degree mark. It was rather cold. That being said, we were in really good shape. So for those who don't know the Algonquin Park campgrounds, they've organized campgrounds. There are both electrical and non-electrical camping sites. So for those who like the sort of more rugged experience of tent camping, that's wonderful. It's for you. For people who want tent camping, but also who want to be able to boil a kettle in the morning and not worry about a fire, that works. And then we had a few members as well who joined with an RV vehicle. So all sorts of options there. And then Mew Lake also has, it's unique in Algonquin Park. You can rent these little structures that are called yurts, which are sort of very basic small cabins with a sort of propane barbecue. So we really want to encourage everybody to join us in the next year. The beach in Mew Lake is westward facing, and I'll show you pictures of it in a moment, but it makes it ideally suited for astronomy. And it was really exciting that we had members of all experience levels join us this year, from people who had actually just recently bought their first telescope, all the way through people like Charles, who has a rig so complex I don't think I could lift it if I tried. So over the course of the next few slides, we just wanted to whet your appetite by showing you a number of the pictures from our trip. So Charles, I wonder if we can move ahead by one. So this is sort of the entrance of Algonquin Park, and in the bottom corner, I couldn't help it. I found a picture of a moose looking through a telescope, but that alas did not happen in this trip. If we move one further ahead, so this picture gives you a sense of actually what the beach area looks like at Mew Lake. So you can see sort of in the distance there, you can see sort of the beach, and there's sort of a white sign, and there's a little road that you can see running in front. This picture, we're literally standing on the radio-free sort of non-powered campsites in Mew Lake. So for people who don't need electrical power, or for example, people who have brought solar panels to power their batteries and equipment, you're not even a stone's throw from our observing area. So it makes it very, very convenient. If you do want an electrical site, however, as you see this road, if you walk about 4 minutes that way, you hit all of the main electrical sites, which is great. So if, and this is a picture, and you'll see in all of the pictures we're going to show in the bottom, it sort of attributes the member who took the picture. So this one was Charles. So if we move ahead to the next one, this is Charles himself, and you can see there we have the annual Algonquin Adventure flag that Bob and Lil had made years and years ago, and you can see they embroidered years on it every time. Every time they had an additional AAA. We have to add 2021 and 2022 to it, and we're looking forward to filling all of the rest of the blue space on that map with many more years. If we move ahead one more, so this I believe was about 5 o'clock, maybe 5:30 in the afternoon, and you can see different members had begun to work their way onto the beach and set up their equipment. Of course, it's much nicer to do this when there is some daylight remaining and you can see what you're doing. You can see clearly there's still some mist coming off the lake there, and so the thing I had said about dew before, if you plan to come to the Algonquin Adventure, it is imperative that you have some flavor of dew control system, whether that's a dew heater for your scope or a dew shield for your Schmidt-Cassegrains or refractors or whatever it is. It's quite a necessary thing. And you can see we had all really begun to bundle up because the temperatures were plummeting at that stage of the evening. If you go further one more, this photo is courtesy of Madeline, and sort of just gives you a sense as we headed into astronomical twilight, or perhaps just before astronomical twilight. And if we head one more further, Charles. So now we're happy to show you some of the image captures that were taken by various members. Now, just one word: not all members who attended were doing electronic astronomy or astrophotography. We had a couple of members who were more visual in their nature. So fear not. This event is open to all sorts of astronomers, whether you have a DOB, sort of a visual layout, or an astrophotography rig, or even binoculars and want to join us. Everybody is welcome. So what you're looking at here is sort of the entire Veil Nebula, or what's more commonly known as the Cygnus Loop, which is a supernova remnant in Cygnus. And thank you so much, Shraddha, for submitting this image. Shraddha came not with a telescope, but with a beautiful DSLR that was set on a star tracker, if I remember correctly. So this is a really beautiful wide field image that she took. Charles, if we move another one ahead. Wonderful. So here we have two images. One on the left is the Bubble Nebula. So the Bubble Nebula, it almost looks as though it's a planetary nebula, which is also known as a supernova remnant, but that's actually not the case. In this instance, there's a really bright and energetic star in the middle of a cloud of gas, and because that star is just so young, so energetic, so large, and so hot, it generates a lot of solar wind, and it generates that sort of bubble that you can see. And on the right hand side, you can see the inner core of the Andromeda galaxy, which 5 or so billion years from now will merge with the Milky Way and be our own home. Charles, if we move another one ahead. This is Messier 16, or the Eagle Nebula in Serpens, and it's an H2 diffuse nebula. The really beautiful thing about this, and so you can see there's these really beautiful veins that sort of work their way through the image. For those who have had the opportunity to see the Pillars of Creation image from Hubble, that very beautiful and famous Hubble picture, that's sort of an area within this Messier object. And Charles took this beautiful capture. If we go ahead by another one, here we can see on the left-hand side the Pleiades, a very nearby open star cluster that has some nebulosity in it. For those who like Subarus, that also is where the Subaru logo came from. And on the right is the Deerlick group of galaxies. I'm not sure where the name Deerlick comes from, so if anybody does know that, please let me know. But you can see there's a beautiful set of galaxies that you can see. If you can move another one ahead. Yes, so this was our bane all evening long. There was one fellow, so the campsites at Mew Lake sort of loop all the way across a fairly big semicircle, and there was a person all the way on the other end of the lake who kept on turning on his car high beams and pointing towards us. We never quite figured out what he was trying to do, but those lights were on and off for the better part of 2 hours. And we wanted to walk over, but thought the better of it. If we move one further ahead, Charles. So this was our group sort of on the second evening. So on the first evening, we took those images, and it was really a beautiful. We couldn't have asked for better conditions. The second night was cloudy, so we decided instead of attempting any sort of cloud filters, that we would instead sort of come together and have a group campfire. And we mined a new joke, and the joke was, how many astronomers does it take to light a campfire? The answer is all of them, but we managed it in the end. If we keep moving ahead. So this is the same lake that we were observing in, but in the daytime. And maybe, Charles, we could just sort of move a little bit faster now, because I think we're using a little bit more than our time. So Algonquin, just so you know, our excursions are not limited only to astronomy, but the Algonquin Park has a beautiful set of other activities for those who are interested in nature and also sort of daytime activities when you wake up. So there's something like 12 or 13 interpretive hiking trails. So here you can see some members who did some birding hikes in the morning. Don't ask me what birds those are, I can't share. There's Charles and some others, if we keep moving ahead. And I think there were 4 rascals, shall we say, 4 kids of Rask members. 2 of those are my own, and 2 are Shraddha's, who joined us this year. And we enjoyed a bunch of really fun hikes, not to mention delicious ice cream at the Lake of Two Rivers store. And then I think it's back over to you, Charles.
So we are planning for the next year, 2023 AAA now. The date that we set is going to be 14 to 17 of September 2023. One of the challenges of the event is that people will have to book the campsite themselves. And also it's based on the weather situations as well for the stargazing part. But the good part is the booking is pretty straightforward. You just have to go to the URL that you see on the screen. And the earliest time that we can go in and book the site is April 14th. So if you want to join us, book earlier on the April 14th, and you will have a chance to actually choose the site that you want to get. And also let us know how to make how to add more fun to this 2023 AAA event. There are a couple of things that we want to do in next year. First one is like we want to continue as an RASC Toronto Sanctions event. And then when we make it into a Sanctions event, we can announce it through the RASC Toronto Central website to let more people know about the event. And then at the same time, we are planning to communicate and connecting with the park administration so that we can actually make some word and announcement into the park newsletter as well, so that we can actually get more people if they are camping in the site as well. And lastly, since we're talking about the observations, as mentioned earlier, Alex and myself, we are so fortunate that we are running, co-chairing the observation committee this year as well. So we did successfully resume the City Star Party. The first one was in July 2022, and then we have 20 people join, and then eventually we continue to grow with more and more people joining and with more telescope as well. We are working to resume the Dark Sky Star Party. So for the upcoming 2023, mark it down on your calendar. The City Star Party we're planning to resume in March 27 to 30, 2023. And then for the Dark Sky Star Party, we are planning to resume in March 20 to 23, 2023. This is like the end of our presentations. So would like to pass it back to Paul and see if any other questions that the team has.
Alex and Charles, thank you so much for giving us a report on the observing gathering and for restarting this long-standing event. Emma, do we have any questions for the gentlemen?
We do. This first question is coming in from Chris Vaughan. Were the imagers respecting the darkness for the visual observers?
Yeah, so we had set up deliberately when everybody was sort of going onto the beach to set up. We tried to set ourselves up in such a way that we didn't sort of shine any light towards the visual observers. We had sort of laptops facing the other way, but in general, I think it worked rather well, and we can continue to think more about that.
That's great. This next question comes in from Leo. Half are lighting the fire, the other half are imagers trying to put it out. Oh, this is about the headlights. Oh no, the fire, sorry.
Probably both.
Yeah. Next question, or I guess it's just a comment, comes in from Grace Horvatin. Thanks for sharing this great experience with us. Looking forward to being able to take part in the event again in the future.
Sounds great.
Amazing. You got another comment coming in from Reza, who says, hopefully I'll be able to join you all next year. I really enjoyed the previous event.
Yeah, we're looking forward to.
And I believe that is the end of the comments.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks again, gentlemen. So that concludes the speakers for this evening. Before we wrap up our meeting, let's go to our president, Tom Luton, with the announcements for this evening.
And thank you very much. And good evening, everybody. Thank you very much to all of our speakers this evening. And let's get right into the announcements. So what you've just seen tonight is one of two types of meetings that we have here online on YouTube. This was one of our recreational astronomy nights. And then we also have our speaker nights, in which a professional member of the astronomical community will come in and give us a talk. If you're watching us live on YouTube right now, don't forget to use the YouTube chat feature, say hello, enter some questions as others people have done. If you're a new member of the Toronto Centre RASC, please introduce yourself. And if you're coming to us from far, far away outside of the Ontario area, please let us know where you're coming from. So there is no speakers night in December because of the holidays. So the next one is going to be in late January. The next Recreational Astronomy Night is on Wednesday, January 4th, 7:30 p.m. Andy Beaton will be discussing the sky this month. Shane Finnegan will be talking about from first concept to first light, my observatory build. And Deborah Saravolo will be discussing the colors of the Mission Nebulae, live here on YouTube. Going forward into 2023, we're planning at this point that RAN meetings, which will be the first Wednesday of each month, will have a live component at the Ontario Science Centre. We will be able to get together and meet, and while the meeting as well will be a hybrid form. We'll be meeting in the Geminid East Room, which is in the front of the building, as opposed to Studio 2. That's because construction is still ongoing on the bridge connecting the front of the Science Centre to the rest of the complex. We'll keep you advised if there are any changes. As I said, this will still be an online with hosts and presenters and audience members able to join remotely. This also gives us the flexibility that in the winter months, bad weather means we just switch to online only with no more meetings canceled. When we do go ahead, masks are recommended, but this will not be enforced. And the speaker nights will remain completely online unless we have overwhelming demand from the membership who wants another night together for socializing. Coming up at the DDO in the next little while, on Saturday, December 10th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Is one of our speaker nights. Dr. Luna Zagorek, What We Can't See in the Universe and Why It Might Be Fuzzy. There's a $12.76 registration fee. Links can be found at rascto.ca. Coming up on Sunday, December the 11th, 12:30 to 1 p.m. is Sunday Sun Gazing. $6.92 registration fee. Links are at raskto.ca. You've just heard the schedule for our upcoming City Star Party and Dark Sky Star Parties. So those will be starting up again in March. And good news, the Telescope Loan Program is restarting immediately. Multiple pieces of equipment are available for members to sign out and borrow. If you'd like to borrow something and you are a member in good standing, please fill out the form available on our website. We will be updating that web page within the next couple of days. The Car Astronomical Observatory, yes, there's been some snow on the ground. So it's winter conditions. Access to the CAO facilities are by members with their families only in a modified communal fashion with the total site occupancy limited to 25 individuals. The upstairs washroom is only for upstairs bookings. The max occupancy for upstairs bedrooms of 2 from the same family per bedroom, total of 6. Communal areas are limited to 3 people. Masks mandatory. All CAO users can use both kitchens, the downstairs washroom with masks. Full details are on our website. Please read everything before making a booking. The Rask Toronto Center runs on volunteer energy, and we've got some spots that need some filling. We're looking for a new website manager. We're looking for an education and public outreach chair. We're looking for a light pollution committee chair and a volunteer committee chair. Marketing committee and committee members. The AV committee, the folks who work so hard to put all these wonderful productions together, are always looking for additional help. And education and public outreach are looking for additional presenters, especially telescope camera operators for virtual star parties. And a reminder that in order to volunteer, you first must be a member. So thank you very much to the members of the general public who offer to help out. But you've got to be a member first. Now, if you're interested in any of this, drop me a line at president@raskto.ca. And speaking of membership, you can renew or sign up for the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada at the national website at secure.rask.ca. It's the holiday season, so gift memberships are available. Additional details available at mempub are available by emailing mempub@rask.ca. Now, our annual meeting will be starting in approximately 10 minutes after the end of this presentation. Registered participants have already received their Zoom links. And just a reminder that we require 25 members in order to legally conduct business. So if you did sign up to attend, please do so. And to everyone else, I'd like to wish you all happy holidays on behalf of Council. Have a very merry winter solstice and a happy perihelion. And with that, I'd like to wish you a very good night. Thank you very much for joining us. Please follow us on all the forms of social media that we've got listed here. If you like what you saw here on YouTube, please like and subscribe, hit the notification bell. Be safe and keep looking up. Good night, everybody.